My name is Kent Philpott, pastor of Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley, California. That's the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're talking to somebody who also lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, Rich Robinson. You live in the Bay Area, Rich?
I do, Kent, and thank you for having me on your show today.
Yeah, well, we've done some programs many years ago.
We did.
We did some programs. We're going to do some more, 2 more at least here. Now, you work for a very interesting organization. What is that?
Well, I work for Jews for Jesus. Jews for Jesus. We've been around as an organization since about 1973 or 4. And I've been out here in the Bay Area for the last 35 years, wearing a variety of hats. But we are an organization. We're a missionary organization composed of Jewish people who believe in Jesus. And we're out there to tell the rest of our Jewish people that Jesus is the Messiah and the way to life. That's what we're all about.
Right. And founded by Moishe Rosen.
Moishe Rosen was our founder and our first executive director. That's right.
Right. And I remember meeting him in 1968. And we were part of Evangelical Concerns, met at the First Baptist Church of San Francisco, pastored by John Streeter. And that's how it was. I have to say, my oldest daughter, I think, was Moishe's first secretary when he started Jews for Jesus here.
It's a small world, isn't it, Kent?
It is. It is, Rich. Okay, now, well, we're going to go back in time a little bit so everybody can know a little bit about who you are. So where'd you grow up?
So I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in a neighborhood called Canarsie, which has its own interesting history. It was where the mob, the gangsters called Murder Incorporated, used to dump their bodies back in the 1920s or so. But when I grew up there, it was a lot different. It was the section we lived in was predominantly Jewish, and my family was a Reform Jewish home, liberal wing of Judaism, and that's where I spent my formative years.
All right. In New York, now there's Reform Judaism, Orthodox,
and in the middle you have conservative Judaism.
Okay, yeah.
But, you know, Jews don't think about theology much. It's more about how do we live our lives now, how do we pass this on to our children, and how do we, support the Jewish community at large. So when I grew up, I don't even think my parents really believed in God. The most religious person in my family was my maternal grandfather. Story was he had grown up Orthodox and lost some of his siblings during the flu epidemic of 1919. So according to family history, he got kind of less religious after that. But I really think it was from his influence that I ended up going to the local temple, that we joined the local temple, that I had my bar mitzvah, that I went to Jewish summer camp. I think he had a lot of influence in those directions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about the family, your parents, and any other brothers and sisters.
Well, I don't have brothers and sisters, but we grew up just a few minutes away from aunts, uncles, and first cousins. So we saw them often enough that they were, pretty much like brothers and sisters. And, like I say, God was not really spoken about much in our house. Although one time, I remember I was really young and I asked my parents, where do we come from? And they must have remembered something that they heard, even though they were not really Bible readers. But they said, like it says in the book of Genesis, they said, well, we're made out of dust. I was really small. So I looked under my bed and I saw these dust balls there. And I said, that's me? And I couldn't put it together. And, there endeth my religious education until I started going to Hebrew school in preparation for my bar mitzvah. Yeah.
Wow. I remember going to Hebrew school in Tujunga at a conservative synagogue because my early friends in high school were all Jewish. David Perlmutter,
okay,
Danny Brom, Gary Tamper, all those guys. And I would go with them to the temple, and I even went to Hebrew class with them.
That's pretty cool. I like that. Yeah.
A little more about your growing up.
I mean, we were culturally Jewish, and I never had any question about my Jewish identity because that doesn't necessarily tie into faith in God and modern Jewish life. So we celebrated Passover, the Jewish holiday in the springtime. We went through all of that. We did Hanukkah at home in the winter, and we also went to the synagogue for the high holy days of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, and the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. And my grandfather took me there. It's really interesting. As Reformed Jews, you're not prohibited from driving on the Sabbath like Orthodox Jews are, but still, I don't remember us ever driving there. I remember walking with my dad or walking with my grandfather to the synagogue, and I remember he taught me one night over dinner, he taught me the blessing over the bread that we call the hamotzi. It's a very traditionally Jewish thing to do is to bless on the Sabbath. You bless the bread, you bless the wine. And so he taught me that. So I think he was my conduit into a lot of Jewish things that I may not have otherwise grown up with. Yeah.
So how about high school? Was that in New York too?
So high school was in New York. So I went to high school in the late 60s, and this was a time of a lot of social unrest in the country.
Oh, yes.
And my high school was pretty much involved in all of that. We had some great times there. This was during the time of protests against the war in Vietnam. And, our students, they would go out and they would march for peace and march in protest of the war. And even some of the teachers would join us out there on the streets. Except I remember one professor, he was a shop teacher named Mr. Natter. Mr. Natter drove a motorcycle to school and wore a bow tie. And the rumor was, because I didn't see this myself, but they say that he used to tackle some of the students during the demonstrations and try and get them arrested. Until one day they put ice cream in the gas tank of his motorcycle, and that ended that. So that was the kind of environment I grew up in. I should add, the same years, late 60s, I went to a Jewish summer camp, upstate New York. That was sponsored by an Israeli youth organization that's still around called Hashomer Hatzair, the Young Guardians. And the camp was called Camp Shomria. And it was sort of to get people enthused about Israel and about being Jewish. We would have in the morning, like you would if you were an immigrant to Israel, we would have ulpan, which was to teach you Hebrew. In the afternoon, we would have work projects called avodah, meaning work. And that was sort of to replicate maybe some of the things that you would do if you were in a kibbutz. Every Friday night, we had a special Sabbath evening, as is traditional, and we all dressed up in white clothes and had a special meal. But what really stands out for me about this time in that camp, the Hashomer Hatzair that sponsored the camp is secular. And one day, some of the other campers performed a play called The Persecution and Assassination of Marat, as performed by the inmates of the asylum of Charenton under the direction of the Marquis de Sade. Yes.
How do you remember all that?
It's about the French Revolution.
Okay.
And it was a musical.
Okay.
And it was one of these big avant-garde plays during the 1960s. So that I never forgot that, I never always remembered. I remember some of the songs also,
Wow.
I won't sing them now, but I remember them.
Okay. So you were going to high school someplace in New York, there where you grew up.
That's right. I took a subway ride there every morning.
You took a subway ride.
Oh yeah, because it wasn't just the local high school a few blocks away. It was Stuyvesant High School, which is kind of a well-known high school for people who know high schools. And so I had to have like a half-hour, 45-minute subway ride into school each day.
Really?
Yeah.
All by yourself. Wow, what an interesting life. So did you play any sports in high school?
No, I didn't really go out for sports. There were all kinds of different clubs that you could join. I don't remember specifically, but yeah, there was. It was the kind of high school where people who were serious about their education went, and there are some very well-known graduates from Stuyvesant who went on to have very public careers.
So after high school, what'd you do, Rich?
So then I went off to college. No gap years then. You were expected to go right off to college.
What college?
Well, most of my college years were spent at Syracuse University.
Syracuse, okay.
Syracuse, upstate New York. And this is where I ultimately became a believer in Jesus.
Really?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, already in high school and then on into college, I was really asking what life was about. And, a lot of us were doing that back then. We weren't into, computer coding or economics or anything. We wanted to know what's life about, the big questions. So I just started studying all kinds of things or delving into them. There was one guy who was sort of a clairvoyant who's not that well known today, but his name was Edgar Casey.
Oh, I know him.
And you might know about him.
Edgar Casey. Oh, my goodness, yes. One of the occult leaders in that era.
And he would go into these trances, and in these trances, he would supposedly, when people who were sick would come to him, they said he could diagnose their illness and prescribe the correct cure. And they wrote these down, all of his sessions with these people, into books. And it was all weird. The diagnosis was weird. The cure was weird. But, I said, well, maybe that's true. Who knows? And then he also ended up saying some things about Jesus. And here's the deal, okay? As Jews, we're raised basically to say no to Jesus. We can't believe in Jesus. We can't consider Jesus. We'll stop being Jewish. We'll join the ranks of those who have persecuted Jewish people down through the centuries. But this was not a church type of Jesus. I mean, if someone had walked up to me out of a church and said, Rich, you should believe in Jesus, I said, no, But Edgar Casey's version of Jesus was very Eastern, very Hindu. That was more acceptable to me because, it's acceptable for Jewish people to become Buddhists, Hindus, follow anything in the New Age except for Jesus, though that is changing today also with the younger generations. But for me, being a boomer, it was okay for me to explore sort of a non-church version of Jesus. And Edgar Casey had said, hey, Jesus is the way to God. So I said, all right, maybe that sounds okay. Maybe he is. But just saying that didn't give me the answers I was looking for. So I was looking at all kinds of other things. I took courses on Judaism, aspects of Jewish religion. I took courses on Hinduism. I remember once I tried to write a paper for one of my religion classes trying to combine Hinduism and Christianity into one religion. And I thought that would be a great idea. Then we could all get along. And the pastor graded me down on the paper. And of course, being all of 19 years old, I realized that the professor didn't see the brilliance of my proposal. And if only he had, he would have given me an A on it. And we could have moved forward with that. And then we had a guy on our campus that I went to. He gave a lecture that I attended. He was billed as Guru Maharaji, the 16-year-old perfect spiritual master of the universe.
Oh, boy, I missed that.
Well, I met another pastor once, the only other guy who knew about him, but when the pastor met him, he was only the 13-year-old perfect spiritual master of the universe. So I met him 3 years later. And so I got interested in all these things, but, just saying Jesus is the way to God isn't going to accomplish much. Then I met a Christian for one of the campus organizations.
Now, this is when you're how old?
I was like 19.
Okay.
And I was open to spiritual conversations. So he talked to me, and he shared the gospel with me. And as he did so, I realized, the one thing that I had never really given thought to is the fact that there's sin in our lives that needs forgiveness, that needs atonement from God, and that's what's keeping us from knowing God. So I found myself being willing to say, yes, I've sinned, and to believe that Jesus' death was to atone for my sins. But man, I still had one foot in other things. I didn't believe that Jesus was God, and we argued with that about that for like the next 9 months. I didn't believe that the Bible had authority. I believed Edgar Casey was the authority. And I believed in reincarnation because the Bible does say you must be born again. So doesn't that prove reincarnation right there? And so we were arguing for like the whole school year about this. I was eager, I really was, to know what was true about God, about life, about ourselves. And at no point did I see a conflict between any of this and being Jewish. I just wanted to know what was true. And for me, that would mean whatever's true about life, it's got to be true if you're Jewish or if you're not Jewish. There's got to be one truth out there. And I was kind of like really pursuing it. But man, this guy I met with, his name was Dan. We would meet a couple of times a week to talk about these things. I gave him such a hard time, I got to tell you. I mean, if I didn't like his answer, I would yell at him and stalk off, and he probably thought this guy's a lost cause. And then I would call him back on the phone and go, Dan, we got to keep talking about this. And he probably didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
But finally, like the end of my sophomore year, he led me to faith in Jesus. And I just felt like I was fighting against God, and I felt like I really needed to believe in the Jesus of the Scriptures, which I did. And it was like the floodgates opened, and I knew something was different.
Wow. And so you're still in college up in Syracuse?
Yeah, I was in Syracuse at the time. Actually, after I came to faith and learned a little bit more, I put out a book table with literature about the gospel, about Jesus, that was written especially for Jewish students, Jewish people. And a lot of people came to that table. We had friendly arguments, not so friendly conversations. And about the same time, the campus rabbi from Hillel, that's a Jewish student organization nationwide, he started...
I've heard of it, yeah. Hillel.
Yeah. Hillel, and he started up a weekly class that he called Answers to Jesus Freaks.
Answers to Jesus Freaks.
And for those who don't know, I mean, Jesus Freaks, as you know, Kent, was what people called Christians back then often. It was not always a complimentary term, but some used it for themselves. I'm a Jesus freak, some people would say. So the first class, and so he's going to be talking about why Jews shouldn't believe in Jesus. The first class, I don't know, a dozen or so students showed up. The second week, everyone lost interest except me and the rabbi. And so I met with the rabbi alone in his office for the rest of the school year with like a random other student maybe another Jewish student, maybe a Catholic student, whatever. And we just argued for the rest of that year. He didn't convince me and I didn't convince him, but it was quite a year.
And this is...
Yeah.
So there you go. And so at this point, Rich, you're not a believer yet.
Well, at that point I was. By the time the rabbi was holding his classes, because, like I say, the end of my sophomore year, that's when I really decided to believe in the Jesus of the Bible and forget Edgar Casey. And I even believed that Jesus was God in the flesh.
Yeah.
Which to Jewish people sounds like, no, we don't believe that, but scholars these days are actually showing that that's much more in tune with Jewish thought of the first century than we had believed. So
that is extremely interesting, what you just said.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Well, that Jewish scholars today are recognizing that to believe that God could become incarnate in Jesus, that he could become a human being and take on human flesh and human form, it's not far into the Judaism of the first century.
Right. Exactly. That's what I thought you were saying.
That is what I'm saying. And it's only, later on that the idea developed that, God could never, have anything to do that intimately with humanity, not in that way, or that God was a solitary unity. He couldn't possibly be three in one. But you go back to the first century, and scholars, Jewish and otherwise, are saying that's not the case in first century Judaism. Can I tell you more about that? There was a scholar, he's at Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City, which trains rabbis to officiate in the conservative Jewish denomination. And he wrote a book called The Bodies of God.
The bodies
of God.
The bodies of God.
So his whole point is that in the ancient Jewish world, as opposed to later on, it was normal belief to understand that God could inhabit a body or inhabit more than one body at a time. And there was a lot of what can we say, fluidity in this kind of a thing of God, kind of interfacing with the world of human beings in this way. And the scholar in his book, The Bodies of God, he ends up saying the Trinity and the Incarnation is not what separates Judaism from Christianity.
Wow.
He said those ideas or similar ones can be found in the Old Testament and the writings of the rabbis. Even later on, he says what really separates Judaism from Christianity is the fact that Jesus did not fulfill what the rabbis understand the Messiah is supposed to do. Jesus didn't rebuild the temple. Jesus didn't gather all the Jews to Israel. Jesus didn't bring, visible peace on the whole earth. He says that's what separates it, but not the Trinity and not the Incarnation.
Never heard that before, Rich.
It's a whole new, a new wave of scholarship by both Jewish scholars and non-Jewish scholars. There are conferences on these topics. There are more articles and books being written about it as we come to understand ancient Judaism a little bit more closely.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. And some of my experiences over the years would say yes to that. And it helps me to understand a little bit more about Jews for Jesus. Helps me to understand how that happens, that takes place. The next program, we're going to go over points of where Jesus fulfills prophecies in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. Okay, now. So now, did you ever get baptized? Did you get involved with a Christian church at all?
Yes, my first church I ever attended actually was headed up by a guy from India who was the international chaplain at Syracuse University. In later years, his title was the evangelical chaplain. We met in his living room, about 40 people each week. And for a 19-year-old, that was a good environment, informal, just in someone's house. And he used to have a 3-hour service. It went from 10 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon.
Wow.
And then after that, we went down to the basement where his family had made Indian food for lunch for everyone. So it was a fantastic experience because there were people from all kinds of different countries there. You immediately got a sense of the diversity of the gospel, people from Africa, Asia, a guy who escaped from communism, I think in Czechoslovakia, some other Jews who were believers. So it was quite the experience. I studied more with some of the campus Christian groups, studied the Bible. I got baptized in a church from the denomination Christian and Missionary Alliance.
CMA. Christian Missionary Alliance.
Right there in Syracuse.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to learn more, so I was asking some of the pastors I knew for advice. Where could I go to study? I was already getting my undergraduate degree, so it would have to be a seminary, which gives you a graduate degree. So I ended up in Chicago, or just north of Chicago, at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School.
Well, now what were you studying in college? What was that?
You don't want to know, so I'll tell you. I didn't know what I was doing. I started on engineering, moved into architecture, moved into a dual major with architecture and English, and ended up with a degree in English literature.
That's quite a movement.
It's quite a movement.
That's quite a movement, Rich. Okay. So anyway, so you went to seminary in
near Chicago, Deerfield, Illinois. My second year there, Jews for Jesus, which I knew about just slightly, opened up a branch in Chicago. We were a fairly new ministry. This is like 1976. And I got involved as a student and wanted to continue doing that when I graduated. So after I did graduate, I was offered a position with a music group that we had at the time that you will know of called the Liberated Wailing Wall.
Liberated. I haven't heard about that group forever. I know all about that.
It hasn't been around for a while, but I played piano for them, but they would not let me sing, except because when we did an outreach on some college campuses, we did Bob Dylan's song "Serve Somebody." That was assigned to me because I could sing, "Gotta serve somebody." Yes, indeed, you got to serve somebody. That was about all I could sing.
I remember Liberated Wailing Wall. Well, we were with some over at UC Berkeley.
Yeah.
UC Berkeley, I have a photograph. I have photographs of the Liberated Wailing Wall up there, just inside the gates with a fountain in front of it. I don't know if you remember that. But a picture of Liberated. Well, who are the names of some of the guys who were in there?
Well, that would have been before my time with the team. You would have had Stuart Dowerman, Steffi Geiser, now Steffi Rubin, Naomi Green, now Naomi Dowerman, and I think Ben-Yeoman Elegant maybe was in there. So yeah, that was the very first. And Sam Nadler, who couldn't sing, so they turned off his microphone. So that was our music team back then.
Wow, that's quite incredible. So there you are. You've graduated from college with your seminary, got your master's degree, and so you got less than a minute to tell me what happened next.
I've been serving with Jews for Jesus most of the time since then, in different capacities at our branches around North America, a few overseas opportunities, and now I'm serving as our senior researcher. Right here in San Francisco. And if people want to know more about Jews for Jesus, because I think you indicated it's something new to some people, they can hit up our website, if I can give that.
Give it.
It's www.jewsforjesus.org.
.org. O-R-G.
.org. And, they can just scout around there and learn a lot more about what's going on.
Now, the next program, we're going to go through some materials that you wrote about some of the most important things. We're going to have 40 prophecies from the Hebrew Bible that were fulfilled in Jesus.
Yeah, we call it the 40 top messianic prophecies. I don't know who decided that they're the top ones. I guess I did.
Okay. Anyway, until next time, we're looking for the second program with Rich. So long.